think it's a question from a spirit. They were asking, what do you mean by being in a state of truth to receive God's love? And wondered if you had an example.
There are, if you think about your life on a day-to-day basis, there are times when you're quite removed from reality. Does that make sense to you, Maxine? Like where you would like to believe that your alter reality is reality. So an example of that at the moment is the whole world wants to believe that we're heading in the right direction. They want to believe that, right? Want to believe they're more conscious and heading in the right direction. I think it's quite obvious to anybody who's really looking that that's not actually happening, right? Isn't that quite obvious to most of you? It's not actually happening. We're probably heading in the wrong direction. But we would like to believe individually in particular that we're heading in the right direction, right? An example of that is, here's a physical example of that. And by the way, when I bring up examples, I'll bring up physical examples, sexual examples, emotional examples, and spiritual examples. But here's a physical one. I recycle. That's a physical example of how we're not facing reality, right? The reason why are we making things that are getting recycled? Why can't we use them for 100 years? Why are we making things that only last one use and then they need recycling? From a practical perspective and a loving perspective, it's very wrong to make something for a single use, right? Because it's not economical on the world's resources. So by saying to you, oh, but we're going to recycle it, it's also ignoring the thing, what resources are going to be needed to recycle this thing. But if it makes you feel good, that's all most people are worried about.
Yeah.
If they go, oh, well, yes, it's plastic, but I'm going to recycle it. Then I don't have to consider anything else because I think that the problem is solved. But the problem isn't solved. Recycling uses water, primarily lots of water, lots of electricity, lots of resources to recycle. Often the recycled product isn't as good as the original either. So what they're finding, like with plastic bottles, the more they recycle them, the more plastic ends up in the water and the more you drink the plastic in the water. So you end up with microplastics when you're drinking. So these are common facts that everybody's ignoring because we want to feel good about using the product, right? And so the motive in that case is obviously bad, but we want to believe it's good. We feel the motive is like, as long as I can sort of virtue signal my way out of my conscience bothering me, right? Because if we were really sensitive, our conscience would bother us about using plastic one time. If we were really sensitive, we'd want to use it over and over and over again. And even then, we'd like to invent something that's not plastic to do the same job. That would be even better, wouldn't it? There's obviously advantages of plastic. If we could invent something that does a similar job, but with all the disadvantages not there, right, then that would be better. But unfortunately, that's going to mean probably the product will cost more. And most of us don't want to pay more.
Yeah.
Right, so we have a lot of issues as to why we virtue signal our way out of our conscience operating.
Yeah, we just put plasters over deep wounds, really.
Yeah. So when it comes to sincerity, so your question from the Spirit was, if we go back to that question.
What you mean by being in a state of truth?
Yeah, so a state of truth says, I am going to face the facts of every single thing in my existence. So physically, that means facing the fact about recycling. It's not actually working. It's not working. It's not something on the planet that's helping the planet. There are whole mountains of so-called recycled product that were meant to have gone through recycling that companies are just going, the people don't know, so we just chuck them in landfill, right? If we face the fact of it, right, and we're honest with ourselves, we can tell you it's not working. How much is the choice of my food? How much is the choice of the products I buy? How much is all of that affecting this decision? You follow me? So an example of that is Yvette thought she was being quite loving, buying you some chairs to sit on. You know, it's lovely that you got chairs to sit on, isn't it? The trouble is they're plastic. They're not what I would have purchased, right? The reason why is, and it's no criticism to Yvette. She did it for a monetary reason, right? Yes, right. Not a good reason, but it's true. So and she thought she was being loving to you in giving you a chair, which, by the way, she was, because half of you would be now sitting on the floor, right? Which is more uncomfortable than sitting in a chair, particularly if you're listening to someone rave on for 5 hours, right? So it's loving to have a chair, but it would have been better to buy one that's going to last 100 years, wouldn't it? Than one that might break and then have to go into landfill. You follow? But you can see the motivation for many of us is the same kind of motivations. It's, I want to do the right thing, but it's going to cost too much to do it right. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried. Also, Yvette was worried too that maybe, you know, if she bought chairs for $100 each, that might last the distance, versus what are these about? Seven. Yeah. So 10 times the amount.
Yeah.
Then you guys wouldn't help her out to do that. Now I have confidence in you guys would help her out, but she didn't have that confidence, right? So she managed to buy, what was it, 20 chairs for $140? Yeah, 140 euro, I suppose that is. When the same amount of chairs, if you bought the right ones, would have cost $2,000. Right? But they'll last 100 years.
Yeah.
And be repairable and not go in landfill. But we don't want to face, for whatever emotional reasons we have, we don't want to face what is right. So to have a sincere desire, we have to face up to what is right, what is righteous, what is actually true. And most of us neglect what is true for what is expedient.
So to receive God's love, you have to be willing to be in agreement with God.
You have to get into agreement about what God feels is true.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is very different to what we feel is right or true.
Yeah. Thank you.